Jai Tulsi Maharani Ki Jai. We offer our most respectful obeisances unto all the Vaishnava devotees of the Lord, who are just like desire trees, who can fulfill the desires of everyone, and they are full of compassion for the fallen conditioned souls. Jai. Panchakalpatarubhyascha kripasindhuvaya patitanam bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Okay. So today is the celebration of Rath Yatra, as well as the disappearance days of Swarup Damodar Goswami and Shivananda Sain. So, I'm going to try to speak a little bit about these different topics today. First, we'll chant. What should we do? We should chant Jai Jagannath, actually. Jai Jagannath, Jai Jagannath, Jai Jagannath, Jai Jagannath. Jai Jagannath, Jai Jagannath, Jai Jagannath, Jai Jagannath. Jai Jagannath, Jai Jagannath, Jai Jagannath, Jai Jagannath. Jai Jagannath, Jai Jagannath, Jai Jagannath, Jai Jagannath, Jagannath, Jai Jagannath, Jai Jagannath, Jai Baladev, Jai Subhadra, Jai Baladev, Jai Subhadra, Bhadra, Jai Baladev, Jai Subhadra, 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 Jagannatha Swami, Nayana Bhattagami, Nayana Bhattagami Bhavatu me. Jagannatha Swami, Nayana Bhattagami, Nayana Bhattagami Bhavatu me. Nayana Bhattagami, Jai Jagannath, 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 Jai Jagannath. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hari Bo, Hari Bo, Hari Bo, Hari Bo, Nichai Go, Hari Bo, Hari Bo, Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Jai Om Vishnupad, Paramahansa Paravatikacharya, also Teta Sitashi Shimad. His Divine Grace Abhaya Chananana Bhaktivedanta Goswami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Anantakoti Vaishnav Vrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Hridas Thakur Ki Jai. Ren Say Kaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sidwaita Gadadha Shivasati Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gopi Gopinath Sayam Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Vrindavanam Ki Jai Maturadam Ki Jai. Jagadada Swami Ki Jai Madhumai Ki Jai. Shrimati Lasi Devi Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Gaur Premananda Hari Hari Bo. All glories the assembled devotees. All glories the assembled devotees. All glories the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swamini Titamani Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharani Nivashesha Shanyabadi Paschatya Deshatarani. So Omagana Timidanda Shagananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Minitam Yena Tasmai Shigadaveda Maha. So, as I mentioned before, today is the commemoration or celebration of Rath Yatra, which is happening today in Jagannath Puri. And it's also the commemoration of the disappearance days of Swarup Damodar Goswami and Shivananda Sain, the intimate associates of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So hopefully we get a chance to speak about both of them. But first, let's start talking about Rath Yatra. Rath Yatra is not just the parade. People should understand that. It's not just the parade. It's a whole process of different steps that lead up to the parade, and there's steps after the parade. And we're going to talk about that right now. So the first step is called the Snana Yatra. Snana Yatra is the bathing ceremony of Lord Jagannath Baladev and Subhadra. And they're bathed with water, obviously. And after they're bathed with water, they apparently get sick. Because if you bathe with water, sometimes cold water, then you definitely may get sick, may get a little cold. So Lord Jagannath apparently gets sick, but actually, we understand Satchidananda Vigraha, the Lord Jagannath doesn't have what? A material body. There's no question of getting sick. You know, for those of us who have material bodies, it's either too cold, too hot. You know, like this morning, I had put a coat on, it was a little cold. Now I'm feeling all right, and later on, maybe too hot. So, but the spiritual body, Satchidananda Vigraha, there's none of these different impediments that are there. So, anyway, so the reason he is pretending to be asleep is basically he wants some QT, quality time with Lakshmi. You know, obviously, you know, sometimes you need a little vacation, 2 weeks off with pay. So, that's the real esoteric reason. Of course, there's another reason, practical reason in the temple. That's the time when they repaint the deities, they renovate the deities, and they get the deities ready. And during that time, of course, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he became very upset, feeling great separation from Lord Jagannath, and he actually left Jagannath Puri, went to a nearby town, I forget the name of the town right now, but he went to a nearby town until Lord Jagannath would come out of this solitary confinement, which is called Nivrita. So during this time when Lord Jagannath is with his wife, Lakshmi, he starts to remember his girlfriends, because it's described, pretty good, it's described that the wives of Krishna, and Krishna has 16,108 wives, they're all expansions of the gopis in Vrindavan. For example, you know, then you have Satyabhama, who is expansion, you know, an expansion of Radharani. And then you also have other, of course, in that, Satyabhama appears as Jagadananda Pandit in Lord Chaitanya's pastimes. And then you have other different associates of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, like Swarup Damodar Goswami, who is an expansion of Lalita Devi. So, anyway, so you have these gopis who expand as Krishna's wives, and Krishna remembers the gopis, and then he's thinking, I have to go to Vrindavan to see my associates, especially the gopis. So he tells his wife, Lakshmi, during this 14-day of Anavasara, which is the resting period where Lord Jagannath is sick. And actually, another point I forgot was that the devotees, they're very much in anxiety not seeing Lord Jagannath, and they're actually writing get-well cards for him. Many temples where they have Lord Jagannath, they're writing. You'll see that on the altar. There's a picture of Lord Jagannath. They take Lord Jagannath off the altar, and they worship him in a secluded place. Him, Baladeva, and Subhadra in a secluded place. And the devotees will be putting different cards, like get-well cards, like Hallmark. Saying Hallmark, anyway. They'll write their own get-well cards. And they'll be writing these get-well cards. Dear Lord Jagannath, hope you get well soon. So it increases the anxiety of the devotees. That's actually another reason for this particular anavasara, or solitary confinement. So then, Lord Jagannath, towards the end of this solitary confinement, feeling separation from the gopis in Vrindavan, he tells his wife, I'd like to go for a little walk. You know, please let me go for a little walk. And she says, okay, you need a little breather, you need a little fresh air like that. So he goes for a walk. Before he goes for a walk, Vrindavan has to be prepared for his arrival. And Vrindavan, of course, is represented by the Gundicha temple. The Gundicha temple is the temple to which Lord Jagannath goes on the Rath Yatra, represents Vrindavan, and he is hankering to go to this Gundicha temple. So anyway, so he takes his Rath Yatra, today's the day of Rath Yatra, of course, to go to the Gundicha temple, to go to Vrindavan. But before he can go to the Gundicha temple, go to Vrindavan, the Gundicha temple needs to be cleaned. Yesterday we were talking about this. It's called Gundicha Marjana. That they would, Lord Chaitanya and his associates, they would take brooms and mops and cloths and go to the temple and take all the water from the Narendra Sarovara, which is right next to the Gundicha temple, and pour it on the floor of the Gundicha temple. And it's described it was like rivers. Whoops. There goes Tulsi, baby. So it was like rivers flowing out from the temple. There was so much water brought by the devotees. That's called like a bucket brigade. Brigade is when people line up and they pass the bucket from one to another. The fire department used to be called the fire brigade. And even today in certain countries like Australia, New Zealand, Fiji, they call the fire department, at least in Fiji, the fire department, the fire brigade. So anyway, so there's so much water coming out of the temple, and then Lord Chaitanya, we mentioned this last night too in our class, then Lord Chaitanya's associates, they're picking up all these little specks of dust, making piles, and Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is examining each pile to see who has done a nice service like that. And if someone has not done such a nice service, then he says, "Oh, you have done such a nice service," in a sarcastic way, just to encourage them. And then they start collecting the dirt even more enthusiastically, and Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu takes his own cloth and cleanses the sitting place of Lord Jagannath, the respective sitting place of Lord Jagannath. So they get this Gundicha temple ready, and this Gundicha temple, it's mentioned by the Acharyas in the Krishna's Kaviraj Goswami, represents the heart of a devotee. Because if we want Vrindavan to manifest in our hearts, we have to purify our hearts. And of course, we can't purify the heart. Like Prabhupada said, our hearts are like pieces of coal. That the more you try to clean, what happens? The more your hands just get all black and dirty, like it takes a scrub brush on coal. So, therefore, Srinvata Swakata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtanat Hriyantaksto Yabadrani Virunoti Saritatam. Then we chant and hear about Krishna, and Krishna is dwelling in the heart, cleanses the heart. Bhavanti Vritkarna Rasayana Kata Tajoshana Dasha Apavarga Vartmani Shraddha Ratir Bhakti Anukrameshti. Krishna personally takes a broom, a transcendental broom, and cleanses our heart. Cheto Darpanam Arjanam Bhava Mahad Bhakti Nirvapanam. And then we are able to perceive who we are, because the bhakti is inherent. It's not inherited. It's inherent. Nityasiddha Krishna Prem. Shuddha Koyanai. So it's there in the heart. So therefore we have to undergo this cleansing process, and the Gundicha temple cleansing represents this cleansing process so that we can perceive Vrindavan. Vishya Chadiya Kabi Shuddha Habe Mana Kabi Hama He Rabo Sri Vrindavana. Okay. So then when the Lord, looks like we're just going to speak about Rath Yatra today, but anyway, then the Lord embarks on the process to go to the Gundicha temple along the main street of Jagannath Puri. Excuse me. Now, water's not going to help me at all. Then the first thing that happens is there's the Pandu Vijaya ceremony. That's when the Lord takes permission from Lakshmi to go, and he's led to the cart, and then when he gets to the cart, actually it's like a whole, almost circus when he's going to the cart. Anyone who's seen, there's like people, jugglers who throw things up in the air, flames going everywhere. And they put Lord Jagannath, he's very heavy, so they have these cotton silk ropes that are brought from, I forget which village in Bengal. But anyway, they're brought, and Lord Jagannath has bounced from one cotton pad to another, which is called a tuli. And he's so heavy that when he hits these pads, some of the substances, I guess, not feathers or cotton or whatever, comes out from those pads. And so he's bouncing and rocking back and forth. It's quite a spectacle. And everyone's chanting and going from side to side. And they bring Lord Jagannath up to the cart. And while he's going up to the cart, King Prataparudra, that is the king of Jagannath Puri, is sweeping the road for Lord Jagannath. Sometimes it's said that that's when the sweeping occurs, not when the Rath Yatra procession is proceeding, but actually when Lord Jagannath and Subhadra and Baladev are going to the cart. But anyway, the devotees do it both ways. So then there's a food offering made to Lord Jagannath. It's called the Bala Gandhi Viprasana food offering. And the cart starts to move. Of course, not by itself. The devotees are pulling the cart. And during the time of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, there's an interaction between Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Lord Jagannath. And the carts wouldn't move. All right. And then the king brought like his elephants and horses and all the men. They couldn't get the carts to move. And at one point, Lord Chaitanya had to put his head behind Lord Jagannath's cart to get the cart to move. And he had this interaction, reciting this poem, you are the same Krishna, and I am the same Radharani, and so we meet beneath the Vitasi tree on the banks of the Jamuna. So he was chanting like that. And very few people understood what he was talking about, but the procession of Lord Jagannath to the Gundicha temple represents the pulling of Krishna back to Vrindavan by the gopis. And actually there's some historical context in which that occurred in a metaphorical sense in Kurukshetra during the time of an eclipse when Krishna met the gopis and the other residents of Vrindavan. And they were thinking, we cannot relate to Krishna in this aspect he's manifesting right now as a king. We want to relate to him in the mood of Nandanandana, of Krishna in Vrindavan. So they were attempting to bring Krishna back to Vrindavan rather than enjoying with Krishna right there. So finally they reached the Gundicha temple, and when they reached the Gundicha temple, the devotees manifest different moods than they actually manifested before. And that mood is the mood of Vrindavan, where everything is very, not so serious, very, very joyful, and very playful. So it's described even when Lord Jagannath gets to the Gundicha temple, the devotees are going into the Narendra Sarovara and other lakes around the Gundicha temple and having water sports, and not even just water sports, they're fighting each other, splashing. Like you have Lord Nityananda and Advaitacharya splashing each other. And Lord Nityananda splashes Advaitacharya so much that Advaitacharya can't see anymore. You get water in your eyes. And they're just like speaking like really, I wouldn't say harsh words at each other, but they're critical words. And this is their exchange, their loving exchange, their rasic exchange between each other. So they become like children. So they go to the Indradunya lake, they're splashing. It's described, they have daily Sankirtan festivals and with the cymbals. They're chanting, of course, at the same time. They're imitating frogs. Advaitacharya acts like Anantashesh, and Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, they're in the water, and Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu lies on Advaitacharya, who is floating in the water, and they're floating in the Indradunya Sarovara. Indradunya Sarovara and Narendra Sarovara. So after 5 days, there's this ceremony called the Hera Panchami. And Hera, of course, refers to Lakshmi. So Lakshmi, of course, has gotten a little suspicious that her husband has left. And he said he was just going for a short walk. And actually, it's not a short walk. So it's 5 days. So she decides, I'm going to teach Lord Jagannath and his associates a lesson So this is called the Hera Panchami. Panch means 5. And also called Lakshmi Vijay, in which she goes to the outside of the Gundicha temple. She doesn't enter the Gundicha temple because Lakshmi cannot enter into Vrindavan because she's very attached to her opulent, awe and reverent mood of worship of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So she goes to the outside, and with her opulence, she actually attacks Lord Jagannath's servants. When Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was present, Lord Chaitanya's associates took the form, or dressed up, sorry. They dressed up as the associates of Lakshmi and also the associates of Jagannath, and there was this exchange between them. Lakshmi's associates arrested Lord Jagannath's associates like thieves. They made jokes and showed great anger. Lakshmi showed great anger at the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And when Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu saw this anger of Lakshmi, he said, Lakshmi's anger is very unique. And then he began to describe about the 3 types of jealous women, which is really an interesting discussion. He said that sober, restless, and mixed. So sober means you just tolerate. You're just jealous, but you're just, okay. You're my worshipful Lord. You can crush me by your embrace. Leave me, all right, dear. And restless means you get really angry. And, it's described that even Lakshmi's associates, they were beating the cart and the servitors, with sticks. Not hard, in other words, they weren't hurting anybody, but they were beating the cart and the servitors of Lord Jagannath with sticks. And so mixed means sort of like a joking with equivocal words, like some sarcasm. Like, I know that you're a loyal husband. That's sort of joking like that, but which is anger, but trying to hold back the anger, and the anger is manifest as sarcasm. So then, Lord Jagannath still doesn't go back. You would imagine after getting beaten up, they didn't beat up Lord Jagannath because he was inside the Gundicha temple, and so was Subhadra and Baladev. So you would imagine that he would go back because all of his poor servitors are getting beaten up by the servitors of Lakshmi. But he still didn't go back. On the 9th day, it took it to the 9th day to go back. So, that's the story of the Rath Yatra. And then he goes back to the temple in Puri. So anyway, that's the Rath Yatra story. And just one other story, and maybe tonight I'll talk about the Indradunya, Nilamadhava, Vidyapati, Vishvasa story. But sometimes people ask, why does Lord Jagannath look like he looks like? And of course, there's the exoteric story of the unfinished deity, which we're going to talk about tonight. That's the apparently unfinished deity, 14 days interrupted when it was supposed to be 21 days, and the sculptor just left. The sculptor, of course, was Vishwakarma. But there's an esoteric reason why Lord Jagannath looks like he looks like. And that reason is as follows. That, and this is, the reason is brought out in a story told by my godbrother, Guru Govinda Maharaj, a very wonderful story. That once upon a time, the wives of Krishna wanted to hear about Krishna's pastimes in Vrindavan. Of course, they were very curious because, as mentioned in the Brihad Bhagavatamrita, sometimes at night when Krishna was lying next to them, he would be crying out the names of the gopis. I mean, of course, that's pretty upsetting for a wife, He's lying down next to you and he's saying, Lalita, Vishaka, Radha, and you're Satyabhama. It's quite upsetting. Quite upsetting. I mean, that's why We told that story from the Brihad Bhagavatamrita last night when Satyabhama got up so upset, she went to the anger room, and Krishna said, get up. I don't love any of you anyway. The reason I married you remind me of my girlfriends. Phew. He called her actually Satrajati. Satrajati. Not, and, because sometimes you call someone by another name, it indicates the type of relationship or your feelings toward them at that particular time. Like, a mother will sometimes say when she's angry at her son, she'll say to her husband, guess what your son did today? So Krishna was saying, oh, daughter of Satrajit, instead of saying Satyabhama, or Satya, or whatever, or Priya, whatever he used to call her. So anyway, getting back to the story, so the residents of Vrindavan, Krishna's wives, they wanted to hear about these intimate pastimes. And so who do they go to? Rohini. Because Rohini is Balaram's mother. She was also there in Dwarka as well as in Vrindavan. So what happened? Balaram is known as Rohini Nandana, right? Rohini Nandana. So what happened is that she said, I will be happy to tell you about these pastimes, but there's no way we should have Krishna or Balaram or Subhadra hear about these things. So what should we do? Let's go into a secluded place, post someone at the door. Who should we post at the door? Subhadra. So Subhadra should be at the door guarding to make sure that nobody comes in, nobody listens. So they post her at the door and they tell her also, don't listen to what's happening. This is a private conversation. And so when you tell someone it's a private conversation, they become more curious. I can't tell you. It's a secret. It's confidential information. And then, that's the problem with the GBC. Sometimes everybody is confidential information. Everybody has a confidential friend, and that confidential friend has another confidential friend. And ad infinitum, that gets on the internet within 20 hours of when the GBC meeting occurred. So anyway, so she was told not to listen. So they start talking about Krishna's pastimes in Vrindavan. And as they're talking about Krishna's pastimes in Vrindavan, she puts her ear to the door, or opens the door a crack or whatever, and she listens. And she's hearing about these amazing, amazing pastimes. Phew. And so her eyes open wide, and her arms shrink up. Remember, these are spiritual bodies. Satchidananda Vigraha. Like we hear about Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's pastimes when he was feeling separation from Lord Jagannath, or ecstasies. Sometimes his limbs would shrink up into his body like a tortoise. And sometimes they become, when he went on, entered into the sea, they would extend like cubits long, really long. And then when the devotees chanted Hare Krishna, it would come back to normal. That's not an ordinary body. So Subhadra, of course, is Yogamaya. So when she heard about this, spiritual Shakti of the Lord. And so she heard about this, her eyes opened wide, and she took that form that we see on the altar. And so what happens is that Balaram walks by, and he sees his sister looking really unusual. And he puts his ear to the door. And he remembers these pastimes in Vrindavan. This is more than Vyabhachari Baba. Actually, it's described, we were talking about this last night, that even, Krishna Prema, the higher stage of Krishna Prema in the Bhavas, can't really be experienced in a material body or else you'll die. You will die. You can't. The body can't accommodate those intense emotions. I mean, sometimes devotees, like we were talking about, uh, last night we were talking about this, sometimes devotees will exhibit extreme, like Pundarik Vijaniti, extreme emotions and roll on the ground and just scream in ecstasy. But that's nothing compared to the ecstatic emotions that occur amongst those who are manifest in their spiritual bodies. So therefore, we cannot express these emotions. Of course, we're not on the stage of expressing our emotions anyway, in a material body, or else we would just leave our bodies. So anyway, so Balaram, the same thing happens with Balaram. His hands shrink up, his eyes open wide, and he becomes the deity that we know as the Baladev, Balaram, in the Jagannath trio. And then Krishna comes by, and you guess what happens? The same thing happens to him, and that's Lord Jagannath, Baladev, and Subhadra, and that's why they look like what they look like. Okay, so we have a few more minutes, and we can talk a little bit about the disappearance day of these two great personalities. First of all, Shivananda Sain. Shivananda Sain was a very intimate associate of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and we talked about him last night in class, that he was a great businessman, and as a businessman, he used his money and his family in serving the Vaishnavas and helped the Vaishnavas on their way to Jagannath Puri every year. He had three sons, Chaitanya Das, Sri Ram Das, and Karnapur Das, who was Kavi Karnapur, who actually was the one who elaborated on who Lord Chaitanya's associates were in Braja Leela. Not you, Braja Leela, but in the Leela of Krishna and Vrindavan. So he, in his Gora Ganadesh Dipika book, which is actually a very famous book, which Prabhupada would cite many, many, many times. So it's described also that Shivananda Sain in Vrindavan was a gopi, and his name was Bira, who was a messenger of Srimati Radharani. And that's described by the son of Shivananda Sain, who is Kavi Karnapur. So there's many stories about him conducting the devotees or helping the devotees go to Jagannath Puri from Bengal. One story we mentioned last night was the story when he had to arrange for the taxes to be paid, and he had to stay behind a little bit. And the devotees proceeded ahead, and as they proceeded ahead, they were waiting for Shivananda Sain, and they were all very hungry, especially Lord Nityananda was very, very hungry. Lord Nityananda was on a tree. He was getting very upset. He said, "I'm so hungry, I could die." Of course, he has a spiritual body. This is a pastime. Don't take this literally. So he said, "I'm so hungry, I could die." And then he cursed Shivananda Sain. He said, "I'm so hungry, I could die. Where is Shivananda Sain? I'm so hungry. His sons should die." And Shivananda Sain's wife, of course, started crying. Shivananda Sain gets back and sees his wife crying. He says, "What are you crying about?" And she says, "Lord Nityananda cursed our three sons to die." And he said, "Foolish woman." He said, "Let our sons die. We don't want to offend or displease Lord Nityananda." Of course, the sons didn't die. Lord Nityananda didn't really mean that curse. It was a test of Shivananda Sain's devotion. Just like, we mentioned this last night, just like Lord Chaitanya tested Srivas Thakur's devotion to Lord Nityananda. He said, "Why are you letting this Lord Nityananda in your house? Nobody knows his background. He's an avaduta. You should just not let him in." And Srivas Thakur said, "I will not be dissuaded from my conviction that Lord Nityananda is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, even if he marries a Muslim woman, or even if he goes into a liquor store." So Shivananda Sain was tested in the same way. So Shivananda Sain comes back, sees Lord Nityananda being very angry, transcendently, kicks him really hard. Boom! like that, kicks him really hard. And Shivananda Sain is basically, oh, I am so fortunate. I have gotten the dust of Lord Nityananda's feet, Padasevanam. Nitai Padakamala. I mean, you have to get Nitai Padakamala one way or the other. And then he arranged for a place for Lord Nityananda, prasadam for Lord Nityananda. But Shivananda Sain's nephew, Srikant Sain, got very upset. And he was getting ready to run to Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to criticize Lord Nityananda. He was thinking, my uncle is a great associate of Lord Chaitanya. How could Lord Nityananda do this to him? So he ran ahead of the devotees, arrived where Lord Chaitanya was, didn't even take off his coat, upper garment, which he was supposed to take off. Those of you who heard last night's class who remember this. He didn't even take off his upper garment, which was you're supposed to do. I mean, Prabhupada quoted in the purport something about deity worship. But it's interesting, Prabhupada actually wore a shirt sometimes when he did a kurta, when he did arti. There's pictures of that. So, that's an injunction that was meant for ritualistic brahmanas, but I'm not going to get into that because we'll get criticized in ISKCON. So anyway, so he went ahead to Lord Chaitanya to complain. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Swarup Damodar Goswami said, take off your upper garment at least. And Lord Chaitanya, understanding, being empathic, reflected the mood of Srikant Sain. He said, no, his mind is very disturbed. Leave him. And so because he was empathic, this Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu applied empathic communication. Yeah, because he actually reflected the feeling of Srikanta Sain. So it diffused the whole situation. So Srikanta Sain understood, let the air out of the anger bag. So he understood, Lord Chaitanya understands everything. He's the Supreme Personality of Godhead. All right. And then Lord Chaitanya asked him about all the different associates that were coming, and they had some discussion. And basically, there was no complaining about Lord Nityananda. And Shivananda Sain actually got the mercy of Lord Nityananda, because when Shivananda Sain arrived in Jagannath Puri, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu arranged for all of his remnants, or some of his remnants, to be given to Shivananda Sain and Shivananda Sain's family. And Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had some interactions with Shivananda Sain's son. There was one son named Puri Das, Paramananda Puri. Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had previously given him that name, Puri. He said Puri Das, but Paramananda was the name actually given. And there was another son by the name of, Lord Chaitanya asked, who is this son's name? And he said, Chaitanya Das. And then Lord Chaitanya said, what kind of name is that? Because he was naming him after Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And so, and that Chaitanya Das, it's described in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, arranged to prepare for Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu very simple food so that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's indigestion, which Lord Chaitanya was manifesting, which, because he has a spiritual body, he doesn't have indigestion, he can digest the whole universe. But he was very pleased with this devotee, Chaitanya Das, who invited him for lunch. So that's, he says, this boy understands my mind. Therefore, today, I am very pleased to accept this invitation. So, that's all we have time for. And tonight, we'll speak a little bit about Shivananda Sain. And I think we may, and Sunday also, we're going to tell the Rath Yatra story about King Indradunya and Vidyapati and all those other nice personalities. It's such an interesting story, because this Sunday we have the celebration of Rath Yatra. Okay, thank you very much. All glories to His Divine Grace. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Jai Radha Galukananda. Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajam.
Adipurusham Tamaham bhajami Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham bhajami Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham bhajami Enam Kanantam Aravindanalayatapsham Marhavatam Samashitam Buddhasundaram Nandar Agom Vidamaniya Vishesha Shobham Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham bhajami Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham bhajami Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham bhajami Angani Asa Sakalem Priya Priti Manti Lasyan Vipan Vikayanti Jiram Jalanti Anadan Maya Sadhu Jvala Vigrasya Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham bhajami 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 Govindam Adipurusham
Gaburi Tehave Ulagasari Hare Hare Buri Te Nayane Babe Dear Uranga Buri Tehave Ulagasari Hare Hare Buri Te Nayane Babe Dear Arakope Nichai Chande Corona Bay Samsara Bhashana Mora Kape Chucha Bay Arakabe Nichai Chande Corona Bay Samsara Bhashana Mora Kabe Chucha Vishaya Jyoti Kambe Shudame Mana Kavi Hamari Rabbo Shri Vrindavana Vishaya Jyoti Kambe Shudame Mana Kavi Hamari Rabbo Shri Vrindavana Rupa Raghu Nathapade Hoiveyakote Kamehama Bujabose Raghunatapade Haivayakati Kavihama Bujabuse Ukalabhiti Raghunatapade Rahumorasha Rachana Kore Sada Nanotau Das Rupa Raghunatapade Raghumorasa Rachana Kore Sada Nanotau Das Goranga Bahu Nite hape hula gacharege Hati hati Pundite nayane paumene Gorangava Nite hape hula gacharege Hati hati Pundite nayane paumene Goranga Bolite Have Hulaga Satri Hare Hare Bolite Nayane Bavenir Goranga Bolite Have Hulaga Satri Hare Hare Bolite Nayane Bavenir Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Radhe, Jaya Radhe, Radhe Radhe, Radhe. Jaya Radhe, 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 Radhe. Radhe Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Paravatikacharya also Tada Satashi Shimad His Divine Grace Abhaya Chananada Bhaktivedanta Goswami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Anandakoti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. For heaven's sake, oh Sri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda Shitweda Gadadha Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktavinda Gajai Shri Shri Radhakrishna Gopi Gopinath Sayam Kun Radhakunda Giri Govardhan Kijai Vrindavanam Kijai Mathuram Kijai Jagadath Sami Kijai Yamunamai Kijai Shrimati Lasi Devi Kijai Samveda Bhakta Vrinda Kijai Gaur Premananda Hari Hari Bol. All glory is the assembled devotees. All glory is the assembled devotees. All glory is the assembled devotees. All glory is to Shri Guru and Gauranga Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pastai Guru Shri Menavakti Bhananta Swami Navani Namaste Saraswati Devi Govamani Pachani Namaste Nirvadi Paschata Dejatari. We'll read the translation. When will that opportune moment come to me when I shiver upon chanting the name of Lord Gauranga? When will I cry while chanting Hare Krishna? When will I receive the causeless mercy of Lord Nityananda so that my desires for material enjoyment become insignificant? When will my mind be purified of material anxieties and desires so that I can understand Vrindavana? When shall I be very eager to study the books by the 6 Goswamis so that I can understand the conjugal love of Radha and Krishna? The lotus feet of the 6 Goswamis are my only shelter. In constant separation from them, I remain Narottama Das Thakur. So, Cheto Darpanamarjanam Bhava Mahadbhakti Nivrapanam Shreya Kairalpya Chandrika Vitaranam Vijavadu Jivanam Anandam Buddhi Vardhanam Pratipadam Pranamratas